Okay, so back to this. As you can clearly tell, this is a wire monstrosity, the very thing that we're trying to avoid from the very beginning when we're making this PCB. We don't want to make this look all ugly and disorganized. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and organize this up. So one thing you can take into mind is that if you actually right-click this, you can actually change the name of the wire. So each of these wires actually has a separate name to them, and by default they call it net something. So net 4 is the fourth wire that we set up. This is actually the first wire that we set up, so it's called net 0. So because this is connected to the ground, we want to go ahead and name this wire name it ground, just to keep things organized. And since this one is connected to power, we want to go ahead and name this one power. So we're going to go ahead and name it power. And then with this in mind, we maybe want to call this one, we'll call it trigger because that's one of the names of the pins. So we're going to call it trigger. This one will be called disk. And this one will be called out. Okay, and that should name this one needs to be named control voltage, so we say C volt will be the name for that one as well. So that should name a majority of these. So what we can do now is actually delete these wires and make it so that's a little more organized. So if I go ahead and just right click here and hit delete, I can go ahead and sever that off. And so what I can do now is actually delete this one as well. And we can actually connect this to ground without actually connecting a wire to it. All you have to do is actually go right click here and say add to net, and it'll give you a variety of different options that you can connect to. Since we named these already, I can go ahead and select ground to connect it to. So it'll now be connected to ground. So actually if I actually put my cursor over here, you can actually see that it's now connected to this pin called ground over here, which is actually very, very nice. So you don't actually need to connect it via wires. You can actually just connect it like so. So with that in mind, we want to actually connect this one right here to ground as well. So actually I want to go ahead and right click here and actually right click here and say add to net and go ahead and say connect to ground. Okay, that's good. And with this in mind, we can go ahead and do that with the rest of this. So I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this and say right click here and say add to net. I'm going to go ahead and connect this to power. Okay, so actually, whoops, forgot one more extra thing. So let me go ahead and delete this again. Go ahead and right click and select add to net. Go ahead and select power. And you want to make sure that on the checkbox over here, you want to go ahead and check it and say connect without wire, because then it'll output this thing called that says power. Again, if you put your cursor over it, it'll highlight everything that's connected to power. Even better is actually I can go ahead and delete this one right here as well, and go ahead and connect this and say that this is connected to power as well. Again, you want to go ahead and select the checkbox over here, connect without wire, so you can now know that's connected to power. This one right here needs to be connected as power as well, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And this one right over here needs to be connected as power as well, so I'm going to go ahead and right click and say, actually we need to delete this. So delete this one, right click here, and say add to net, and say this one is connected to power as well. So as you can see, I've just pretty much removed like a giant chunk of wire just by saying that this is by default connected to power, and the computer knows that because I said that it's connected to power, it's going to go ahead and map itself and say that it's connected to power. So over here, this is connected to ground, so I actually wanted to go ahead and delete this and say that this is just connected to ground. Great, I just removed this giant chunk of wire that I didn't really need to have. I can delete this one right here as well and say that this is connected to ground. And then for this one, I'm going to keep that wire right here. This wire I'm going to go ahead and remove. So hit delete. I'm going to say this is connected to out. Oh, another thing in mind is like when you're doing this option, if you want to add an extra net, you can go ahead and hit plus right here, so add new net. You can name the net whatever you want, and it'll be added to the select list of nets that you can use. So that's just another way that you can do this as well. So go ahead and I'm going to set this to out again. So that's out. This one is going to be connected to out as well. And right over here, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Might as well just do that. So we're going to go ahead and delete, whoops, yeah, delete, and we're going to connect this to add to net. We're going to go ahead and add it to out, because that's what it's connected to. All right, so that pretty much removes a giant chunk of that stuff. Actually want to delete this one more right here and just say this is connected to power. So all the power pins are now connected. And yeah, that just goes ahead and just pretty much removes all the nasty gunk that we didn't really want. I can go ahead and even be more a little bit crazy right here and just go ahead and hit delete here and say this is connected to trigger. And so now, and this is also connected to trigger as well. And say right over here that this is connected to trigger. Net properties. Okay, so it is by default connected trigger, but it might be also useful to also display the output as well, just to keep things organized. So I'm going to go ahead and first move this, and right over here I'm going to go ahead and say a display name. So it'll now show that right here it's connected to trigger. So that's connected to trigger as well. And yeah, that pretty much removes a giant chunk of all the wires that we had previously. So that's a good way just to keep things organized. On top of all this, if you want to even go further, you can actually create sheets. So actually you can see right here on the bottom right here, there's sheet 1. If you want, you can actually separate these parts into separate different sheets, so you can actually rename and organize them. So actually go ahead and do that. So if you hit right click and say add, you'll make a second sheet. I guess for this sheet, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and rename the sheet and use this one to actually hold the LED circuit. So this is a LED circuit right here. And what I can do now is over here, I can go ahead and select this. So hold the left click and select these parts. Right click, and I'm going to go ahead and cut them. And on the LED circuit, I can go ahead and paste them here. So paste. So now this part right here, now the LED circuit is now on this one, this little sheet, instead of actually on this one right here. And I can get even crazier if I want. I can actually move this one right here to another sheet and call that the output wires. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this and call this output wires. So I can go ahead and select this, right click, cut, select output wires, right click, paste, and there you go. So the only thing on this one is the actual 555 timer circuit. So I can go ahead and right click this and rename it and say 555 timer. And there you have it. So, I actually, instead of having this giant, massive wire monstrosity, I separated the circuit into 3 different parts. So this is the main 555 timer circuit. This is the one for the LED. And in fact, actually, what I want to do is actually rotate this so I can actually make it look a little bit cleaner like that. And then this one here is the output wire. So that's another one as well. So this is the sheets it's maybe not that useful for the case with this one because it's just not that many components. But once you get to make more complicated circuits and you have a lot of different submodules, the sheets is actually very, very useful. So say for instance, you have an EKG circuit. On top of that, you have a Bluetooth circuit, and then you have one that connects to Wi-Fi. So you can actually put one that has the EKG circuit, another one that contains the Bluetooth circuit, another one that contains the Wi-Fi circuit, and then you can also have one on top of that that has the microcontroller circuit that connects all those parts together. So again, this is just a really good way of keeping things organized. So with this, we now have a very, very organized schematic, and we can go ahead with this and make the PCB board, which we'll be doing in the next video.